what I find very interesting there is you're talking about the feature as an identity. So, and again, that is something that reminds me actually of another Italian, Michelangelo.
Another.
So, what he said, the sculpture is already inside the marble. I just remove what doesn't belong. I just removed everything that wasn't David from the marble. He didn't see himself creating David. He saw himself removing everything that trapped David inside. And then it comes to, because as a child I always traveled to Seravezza and Forte dei Marmi with my parents. My father is an artist himself. He's doing sculptures, and so I saw this process of creating art also, and seeing marble as well. And something that stuck with me is like when I saw how my father also worked, like it was not always invention, but it was also like revelation from the things that we see as humans. So the things that you see as well. And I would say there's a clear DNA of Parmigiani before Guido and after Guido. And that's why I would say, like, I could see that you work the same way in some way or another. I don't know if you have thought about that in a certain specific way like this before. But and there's also like another thing regarding Michelangelo is he finished parts of sculptures that people would never see. So there's all this process that you just described. I would have never known it. Still, I appreciate it, but I don't have the understanding. Do you have to go to the length? Maybe, maybe not. But at least from your philosophy, you have to. And creating something that people won't notice, but because why? Because it has to stay true. The truth mattered more than just the object or like observing the surface. And the work had to complete unto itself. Whether anyone noticed or not, but ultimately trusting also your instinct that people will notice eventually, which comes into the identity.
Yeah, of course, we have to communicate and help the understanding, but the idea is that we are serving customers that feel it. Probably they don't rationalize it, everything we do, but they get it. And the Gentile Attrapante is probably the most important step into extending that aesthetic philosophy that we put on the collection to the technique, because it's the first innovation that we did since the relaunch. And it speaks the purity of our style, because the function is brought to life when you need it. And when you're at home, you don't need the GMT, so it is not a GMT. You need an elegant two-hander. And when you're traveling, you want to have that flawless expression of pleasure of the function. And so a world premiere came out because it is a GMT like no other. And GMT are in the industry since decades, if not centuries, and they have been never interpreted like this. In the interest of that purity of the idea, going to the essence of the idea, in a way which is to the core, no? Because the more simple it is, the more powerful it is in expressing the idea. And the intuition we had, which was really a sparkle, no? Just 1 second. We were in the room next door, and it took us 5 minutes to get to that idea, because the brainstorming was extremely intuitive, no? And when it's so quick and so strong, the wash has been demonstrated to be extremely responding, no? To the customers responded to this immediately, no? I think we had launched 120, 130 movements at the launch. We had 1,100 deposits. So you can imagine that we had a waiting list, not because we wanted a waiting list, but because it took 2 years to fulfill the request. But that purity of the idea, that simplification of the complication, if you want, is part of the language of this elegance, this clean design, this pure aesthetic that is extremely intellectual to reach, but is extremely intuitive to be interacting with, whether in the usage of the watch or in the aesthetic of the watch. The Miniature Trabante is the same philosophy. I mean, it was more complicated to express it because the Gentile Trabante is intuitive in the GMT, what it is, and the Trabante function, what it is. The only surprise what you don't have a chronograph. In fact, I remember there was an Italian journalist, he unfortunately passed away last year, but Augusto Veroni came to me and said, "You had me there. Oh, what happened?" I was waiting, where's the chronograph? No, it was a GMT Atrapante, there's no chronograph. Atrapante is the function of catching up of a hand, and by using it on a different hand after 195 years of the patent of the Atrapante function on a chronograph, you think almost 200 years nobody thought about using that approach outside of why it was born. And this gives you the narrow-minded thinking that the industry has, because it was invented with the chron. I know they ever thought about using it in another way. And the Miniature Trabante is something completely different, but we probably didn't explain it as simply as that, because the real idea came by interpreting a rotating bezel of a scuba. No? We are watchmakers. Why do we have to delegate a function to a case? Let's do it with a movement. That was the intuition. And then you do something that doesn't exist, because that is not a scuba. It's not a diving watch. But by placing the minute hand, like you would place a moment in which you have to go out of the water, or in which you have stopped doing a presentation at the board, or if you have to go to the gate from the lounge. I mean, these are all moments in which you have stopped doing something and you master the section of the time, like an angle. You have a quarter of an hour, 90 degrees of those two angles, of those two hands are telling you, I've got 15 minutes. And then you master your time, and then you master your delay. You're indulging in yourself, and you leave the lounge 2 or 3 minutes later because I can run and I can catch the plane. But those are things that are trying to push the needle forward. We do it aesthetically and technically. The technical part is as important as the aesthetic part. And each technical decision, before even knowing in which watch you will put it, is already a design statement. Take, for instance, this watch. The petite seconde of the toric is in that dimension. It's quite big, no? You see that for this opening, which is a 39 opening, it's the same of this one, that are two. There's the same circle. So we design a series of movement in the same moment, playing with the same philosophy for the same opening. You cannot do a 3/6 with this, because the counters will be very small. You can't move the pivots. They come out there, so you have a design constraint. This watch works in this size. No? And it's a choice. Wanted to do it because if you do it smaller, you do a smaller petite seconde, it brings you back in an old-fashioned mood. We didn't want a vintage mood on this watch. We wanted to be expressing something contemporary. So that is the reason for which this watch is this dimension and this open. If you think of the Miniature Trabante, we took away the second. This movement, when I came, had the petite seconde at 6 o'clock. We took it out. I could have kept it. I had it in stock, the movement. But that petite seconde is giving you a too classic mood on a sport elegant watch. But if you put the central second hand in the same, it would be too sporty. It moves you towards a more sporty mood. By taking out the hand, you are perfectly in the middle between an elegant and a sport watch. So you're using the technique of how a function is displayed to underline elegance versus sportness, or versus a classic mode if you're using a petite seconde. So when people ask me why are you not putting a second hand on a PF, because it pushes the sporty side of the collection, and we are more on the chic side of that collection. it's a sport chic watch. I would say it's more a chic sport watch because we are more on the underlining the elegant side of that career. So plenty of things go into the mood that you're transferring and the feeling that you want to convey, and they are both technical and aesthetic.